Track 3. Who is God? Before going further, I want to explain something. In the Real Life at 180 Degrees book/video series, I go deep into discussing who God is, because I don't think you can find assurance without knowing who God is. In the previous chapter, I shared a number of verses that say belief in Jesus Christ is all the assurance we need. But who is Jesus Christ? If we don't know who He is, how can we believe in Him? I think I mentioned this in future chapters, but I want to share now. Jesus Christ is not separate from the God of the Old Testament. The God who brought the Israelites out of Egypt and led them as they wandered the desert for 40 years is the same one Jesus glorifies. And Jesus lived His life in obedience to the same laws that God gave the Israelites at that time. And His death was the completion of the sacrificial law that God gave in the book of Leviticus. You need to know this because a simple confession of Jesus Christ should not be your assurance alone. Now the question is, how can the loving Jesus Christ be equal to the angry God of the Old Testament who talked about stoning women for adultery or killing children for walking away from the faith? Jesus Christ is the embodiment of those laws and shows us the mercy of God. The example of when the Pharisees catch a woman in adultery and bring her to Jesus and say, according to the law of Moses, we are to stone such a woman. And Jesus says, you who are without sin, cast the first stone. And all the men walked away because they knew that they were all guilty of sin and had no right to stone her. You can read the full account in John chapter 8, verses 4 to 11. Now Jesus, being God in the flesh, was the only one lawfully able to stone that woman. But He said to her, neither do I condemn you. Jesus Christ is showing the same mercy of God in the Old Testament, mercy shown not because of sacrificed animals, but because in God's very nature is merciful. Now I recommend people read the books Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy to get a better picture of who God is. But I'll share now. God's law, which is holy, righteous, and good, is what separates us Christians from the rest of the world. The nations around the Israelites had idol prostitutes, which God condemns. Nations offered their children in fire. They had sexual relations with animals. Relatives such as mother, sister, aunt, daughter, sister-in-law, daughter-in-law, stepmother, stepdaughter, and offered their children as prostitutes to their, quote, gods, end quote. You can read Leviticus 18 where God says that it is the nations around them that do these sexual things. So I want to tell you that all of these laws are to keep the nation of Israel holy, and we Christians, saved not by the obedience of the law, but because of the mercy of Jesus Christ, should know that when God says don't do something, it's not because He is trying to make rules, but because of His love for us. And I can testify to the goodness of my God. And I can testify to the grace that God has shown me. Perhaps we don't have religions that God spoke against in the time of Moses, but we are still to be separated as a holy people. We are still in a time where sexual promiscuity is everywhere. We have drunkards and prostitutes, and we have foul language coming out of mouths. The tongue, James 3 says, is like a small rudder steering a large ship. So belief in Jesus Christ is not just believe and then go on and live your life. It is an acknowledgement of the goodness of God and accepting that it took another to make you perfect before Him.